Hey kids, it's Jurassic James. Jurassic James Explains, looking at Chilantaisaurus. Say it slowly, Chilantaisaurus. Get it closer, Chilantaisaurus. That's the Chilantai salt lake, basically in China. This dinosaur lived about 92 million years ago, and with the beginning of the late Cretaceous. Now, one thing that's important about this animal to remember is the name, of course, if you are an English speaker or paleontology in the West, as we know it, started with British, French, and then we now call German scientists. They all spoke different languages. Therefore, what they use Latin and Greek as a common language for their critters' names, basically. Well, it turns out if you are a Chinese scientist, you don't care about that. You give them your local names, which makes sense. You would give them dinosaur names are usually locations, description of the animal, something like that. As far as the type specimen, the first one found, the one described in 1964. Basically, they found leg parts, a little bit hip bones, one arm bone, no skull, no tail, just those few bits. There's couple specimens associated with this animal, but one of them was redefined as a Dinosaur, so there's a whole thing there. The main thing is, it's a very unusual dinosaur to be defined in toy mode, which is really kind of cool. And as far as its overall body size, imagine something like Allosaurus-sized dinosaur. Now, with the official scissors, 36 feet long, etc. Official scissors Jurassic James we have here. There's something I want to unpack about this animal. So let's go ahead and free the beast. So as far as toy playability, let's see. You just turn the tail like this. There's no noise. And it does that, which is a very generic theropod thing to do. So, looking at the animal, the first thing I'm noticing that I'm liking, the hands are turned this way. 3 fingers, very good. Again, we don't have a hand, so we can't be sure, but given it's a large theropod, most likely, given when and where I lived, probably, right? The skull is entirely guesswork. There's no skull. So, given what we think it could be in the family tree, this makes sense. I mean, it could have had some weird structure, who knows? And most likely to keep different species apart, that's what you would have, those different structures in their face. Tail's pretty neat, those little spikes there. Again, this is all things that are idealized, stylized by the artist to create this animal. They only have this part from the hip and leg bones and one arm bone. So that's pretty much it for the type specimen that's acknowledged as a genus. So the main thing when I saw this dinosaur, I was like, what's the big deal? This is 92 million years ago, China. Not a time you normally hear about. Normally the most famous dinosaurs are going to be in the late Jurassic Morpho Formation, at least in America. Late Cretaceous, particularly in the Campanian, around 75 million years ago. Think Canada's Dinosaur Park, parts of, in Bastrop, Hell Creek, the Cretaceous T-Rex, that time. This is a time that's not normally shown in toy world, mostly because this area is not as well geologically mapped, and so there's not a lot of dinosaurs known from there. There's a Pachycephalosaurid, not Pachycephalosaurus, but a Pachycephalosaurid, what do they call it? The ostrich, ornithomimids, the ones like ostriches, those guys. And so they're found there, and it's like partial skeletons of those guys, but there probably would have been iguanodon-like animals, probably some kind of sauropod, but as far as right now, they haven't found those things. So what's interesting to me about this guy is its lineage. So, given that there's so few bones, the question is, how do you know what it's related to, right? Last week, 2 weeks ago, time's a thing, we went over actually, who was it? It was Titana, this is a near wave mate, words are hard sometimes, Tyrannotitan. And so Tyrannotitan is in the same grouping as Giganotosaurus, Mapusaurus, and Carcharodontosaurus. You're saying, who are they again? The Carcharodontosaurids, that's their family group name, right? And an offshoot of this, well, in general, this lineage, we believe, evolved from something like Allosaurus. Now, I'm not saying the genus Allosaurus itself became these things. I'm just saying that the features we see in Allosaurus, these are derived from that. So there are a lot of Allosaurid things walking around like Jurassic. This is the main group. There's an offshoot group called Neovenators. Now, I did a video on Neovenators. This is a Jurassic World one. I have non-Jurassic World figures, but given what he's made of, I'm keeping a theme here. So the thing is, we're trying to figure out where this guy fits in the family tree. Now, the bones and the way that works in paleontology, since you're wondering, kids, is we take the bones we have, measure them, scan them, etc., and compare them to those same bones in other dinosaurs, particularly dinosaurs we think it could be. So, for example, dromaeosaurs or raptors aren't that big. the biggest Dromaeosaurus Utahraptor that we know of. So 20 feet, that's pretty big. But given the size of the animal we have here, given the time period it's in, giving it where it is, it's probably going to be some kind of Carcharodontosaur cousin or Neovenator. So the idea is that they're saying, well, it must be natural. So let's compare it to those bones. Here's the thing. I think there's a newer paper, but one of the most prominent papers suggests that this guy is a cousin of Neovenator who was found in Britain. Remember, this is not a Carcharodontosaur. They're kind of related to each other, but they're like an offshoot. I'm going to explain that in a minute. But the idea is that these four are much closer related than this guy, but they're much closer related than this guy, right? And so it thought that this guy falls in next to that group right there. Now, why is that so? And I'm pretty sure if you're a kid or you're like, well, these two look kind of similar, and these are just toys that have been Jurassic Park stylized. So the main thing to point out is how this works. What does this mean? So Albert Einstein did a thing called thought experiments. Now, experiment, you take some stuff and you do things and you record what happens and see the outcome. A thought experiment basically was he would just think about different scenarios and situations, and knowing how things move and act, he would say, if this happens and this happens, and here's your conclusion. So what we're doing now is not quite a thought experiment, but I want to give you an example of why the lineage of these guys are so cool. Now, say for example, you met an alien who spoke perfect English somehow, and did not want to destroy the world, and that alien was like, what is a cat or a dog? It seems that your species are really into these things. Somehow they miss feeding cats and dogs. Follow me here, kids. And so you write down, because in science, to write down your ideas, and you write down, well, it has 4 legs, and it has fur, and it has a tail, and 2 eyes, and 2 ears. And as the list goes down, you're still talking about a dog or a cat. You can list like 20 different features, and that can still fall on dog or cat. Now, one thing that cats have that's more prominent are whiskers, right? Something about, and you say, well, one meows, one barks. Well, that's something that is a useful tool for living cat or dog, but say they were fossilized. So the idea is that you can't use those kind of features. Or you say, well, dogs are more social than cats in some ways. You can't use that because you're looking at skeletal structures, right? That's the caveat I didn't mention earlier in the video. So the idea is that once you get down to a certain point, you're really defining each group. So when I say whales, some scientists a couple hundred years ago have been writing down what makes a whale a whale. When you say bird, again, someone came up with what is a bird. Here are all the list of things. That's what we learn in college usually. That being said, with a cat-dog analogy, here is a toy generic house cat. This is the company's called Mojo. Shiba Inu is kind of the dog breed. So you have a cat and a dog here. Now, follow the idea. So cats aren't just what's in your house. They're a cat grouping. And for most people, you think of there's like house cats, and there's like, quote, big cats. And that's your Panthera tigris, Panthera leo. And so the other members of Panthera, we have our cheetahs, we have our leopards. I think one of them is a different genus. Some leopards are different genus too. But the idea is that these guys are what we call the big cats. They're not house cats, they're larger cats. They share a common ancestry closer than the actual cat you see here. Now, why is that important to us? Because house cats are closer to mountain lions, not to scale, and bobcats or lynx than they are to the big cats. But these groups are closer together, and in fact, I'm not a big cat zoology person, but my understanding of a friend who does study this, they were saying that the skull of a tiger, lion, cheetah, and leopard are very similar. So if you were to other than their size being different, if you were to just be not as well trained and look at them, you see the same kind of skull. So imagine applying that to paleontology, how we see these very similar skulls. But these stripes, just tigers have stripes to blend into trees. Lions have the kind of tan to blend into the grasslands. Leopards have this kind of blotch pattern for trees. Cheetahs hide in bushes, I guess. I don't know. But the idea is that physically and behaviorally, they're very different cats, but their skulls are very similar. So apply that to, again, dinosaurs. And then you have the felid group. These are Panthera felid group. Your essentially your house cats and the smaller cats, basically. And they all share the common ancestor, making them cats, somewhere in the Miocene, about 20 million years ago. On the dog branch, we have, of course, our domesticated dogs and all the various breeds. We have African wild dogs, which are really, really interesting animals. And, of course, we have a wolf here. These are all canids of some sort. It's kind of dog-like animal. So these guys are more closely related than these guys. But they're all a group called carnivora, which also includes bears and seals and mongooses and things. But the point of the story is, let's say our Chilantaisaurus is actually like a hyena. Now, I want you to, if you know the answer, you know, huzzah. But for everyone else, you look at a hyena and say, where does it fall on this family tree? Is it closer to the cats, closer to dogs? Is it just its own thing in the middle? Where do hyenas fall in? And again, biologists have spent time and years writing up these things. And it turns out that hyenas have more in common, or a offshoot of the felid branch, more than a calid branch. Even though a hyena to the casual observer looks like a dog, they actually are closer to cats. And even mongooses, if you look at the carnivore, the group that, just like a theropod for all the meat eaters, that's these guys and the raptors and rexes and all that. Carnivore is named for like bears and cats and dogs, like the mammal groups. And so if you want to see more of this, I have a link to all this, my website. I'll put below. But the idea here with the hyena is that it's actually closer to cats. Not these two groups. It's in the felid group. It's closer to cats. It's not a cat. But it's not a dog. You think, why do they look kind of like dogs? Why do they act kind of like dogs? In fact, cats usually are short burst attacks. They're going to pounce on prey, knock them down. I mean, cheetahs are unique. They run really fast. But most cats are trying to, the joke I always tell is that when people look at Jurassic Park, the idea is the dinosaurs are roaring and running at you. So most animals, when they're hunting you, they don't do that. They don't tell you they're there by making noise and going after you. That's horrible movie monster stuff. What they really do, in fact, I always do the example of when I teach about mountain lions, that every story of a survivor of a mountain lion attack says, I was walking, I felt a great force out of nowhere push me down, and a pressure on my head. That's the animal's jaws. So the idea is that these animals are going to be making all this noise. But dogs, what they do, they just run after their prey. They just go after it, just run and run and run it down. I mean, African wild dogs, it's sad because they're hunting and killing something, but it's really an interesting thing to observe. And so hyenas have a very similar running, mobbing activity. So they are of the felid branch, but they actually have behavior like the canids in that sense. And so if we were looking at this, that kind of that behaviorally is convergent evolution to dogs, but they're actually a felid group. Now, why is that important to your story? Our bigger story is that when you look at our dinosaurs here, again, I want to point out just these 4 cats. One can run almost 60 miles per hour for like a minute. Whose claws do not retract because they're for gripping the ground. One hides in trees, jumps down, very powerful, pulls a prey up in the trees. One lives in a social group, the male and all these females. And then one is solitary and likes to be in water. And again, these animals are very close related, paleontologically speaking, but different lifestyles, very similar skulls, but different lifestyles. So again, apply that idea to our theropods here, when we only have leg bones, and we only have parts of one bone from the arm, and a few specimens we're not sure who its cousin is. And so that's kind of, when I saw this dinosaur in the store, and I was like, okay, what can I talk about it? Because other than, oh yes, it's a theropod, it was a carnivore, it lived in Lake Cretaceous like 2 million years ago. That's information, but for me, it's like, well, the biggest debate is where it fits in. And that's the fun part, is that these groups, this Allosaur, Carnosaur, Carnosaur group, there's a new paper that says maybe it's in the Coelurosaur group. What are Coelurosaurs? I'm glad you asked. It turns out Coelurosaurs are the group that includes T-Rex, Raptor, the Gallimimus group. All those, usually, most of them are smaller. Like the Tyrannosaurus family is the biggest member of Coelurosaur. So they're the other branch than these guys. If these are cats, they're the dogs, basically. And so that's the question. How could it be such a huge interpretation? But again, a few bones, millions of years old. That's what it is. And so this is a weird video. Usually I have more answers in this, but I think I wanted to also show you guys that when you watch documentaries, read books about dinosaurs, you hear talk like this, we often will talk about what we know, because we're focusing on that part, what we actually know, and building off of that. There's a lot we don't know. And so this dinosaur in particular had forced me to tell you that. Like, here's what's going on. There's a lot. That's why I get the same questions every day. Like, what's the biggest dinosaur? What is it? What's the fastest, etc. But like this guy, why make an Indominus Rex? You have this weird thing in Asia that's running around. Not as big, but the idea is that this is an animal that's just a neat theropod that was some 36 to 40 feet long. Estimates between 3,000 to 8,000 pounds. Big interpretation there. And so the idea is that this is a neat dinosaur that we don't know much about. I mean, we know a lot about what we have, but not where it fits in, And so that's why I wanted to point out this toy. And I know I'm still going to, I know some of you guys who follow me watch or prefer non-Jurassic World figures, but I have a lot of them, kind of like a backlog. And so some of them I have non-Jurassic World models to compare to, which one to do, I think, next. Other ones I just have just the guy. So that's kind of where we are. With that being said, thank you for tuning in. I'll see you guys next week, or maybe a couple days. I don't know how this works. Sometimes, depends on how much I can film today. Thank you.